sometimes we might end up with many vectors in 2 dimensions, right? So we have an object that's both moving, north and south, what we would call the y-axis of our graph, and we have object, and at the same time, there's some sort of a horizontal motion or an x-axis motion. In that case, what we're going to do is we're going to take all of those little individual components and we're going to kind of put them together to figure out the overall movement that happens in the x-axis and the overall movement that happens in the y-axis. So I'm going to start by coming over here to our table, and we're going to look at all of our different vector directions that we were given here, and we're going to try and put them into the table, remembering our plus and minus for we'll say that north is positive and south is negative, and we'll say that west is negative and east is positive. Okay, so 5 meters per second north. Since that's north, that would be a positive direction. So in my y-axis table, I'm going to put a plus 5. My next one is in the east-west direction, right, the x-axis direction, and that is going west, west is negative, so I'm going to put in a -2 in that column. Then the object goes 4 meters, or has a speed of 4 meters per second north. So again, north, that is 4 meters per second. So I'm going to put in a +4. North is positive, and that's on the y-axis, right? North, south is y-axis. And then I've got 4 meters per second east. East is on the x-axis, right, going horizontally, and that is a positive. So on my x-axis side, I'm going to put +4. And then my very last one, 2 meters per second south. So south is in the y direction, right on the y-axis of my graph. And it's in the negative direction because it's south, so I'm going to put -2. So now I'm going to add all of those together. So I'm going to sum up the x and the y separately. So 4 minus 2 gives me a +2, since I'm talking about east and west. In that direction, or in that plane, right, in the horizontal plane, east is considered positive. So that would tell me that this object overall moved 2 meters per second at a speed of 2 meters per second east. And then on the y side, we've got 5 plus 4 is 9. 9 minus 2 gives me a +7 meters per second. And since that's plus, we're talking about north and south. North is what we call our positive direction. And so that would tell me that the overall speed of this object was 7 meters per second north. All right, so we've got all that worked out. I'm going to go ahead and kind of just sketch out the actual path, and then we'll think about how these numbers correspond to what we see. So I've already gone and made my vectors. I'm just going to drag them onto my grid so we can see what happens. So the object starts out with a speed of 5 meters per second north. Then we've got a speed of 2 meters per second to the west. Then we've got a speed of 4 meters per second north. Then we've got a speed of 4 meters per second east. And then finally a speed of 2 meters per second south. Okay, so these are all of the vectors that are explained right here, or that are listed out right here. The resultant velocity would be this right here. Sorry, all my vectors didn't quite get in the right spots. But, okay, so that is my resultant. My resultant would be that value right there. Okay, now we know that to find this resultant, we're going to need to use the Pythagorean theorem. Well, that's a little bit tricky to do when we've got all of these different vectors going all over the place. But because we simplified them here, now I can just create a triangle using the total that I moved in the x-axis, or the total speed I had in the x-axis, and the total speed I had in the y-axis. So that will look something like this. So in the x-axis, I had my total speed on the x-axis was 2 meters per second. So there's a vector showing 2 meters per second. And then on the y-axis, we ended up with a total of 7 meters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 meters per second north. Okay, and so Let me leave that there and get another one. So there's my resolved components, right? This is the total of how fast I was moving in the x direction, the total of how fast I was moving in the y direction, and you'll notice that the vector is exactly the same. Okay, and so that's how we would then solve. We would use Pythagorean theorem now. 2 squared plus 7 squared equals c squared, and we'll be able to find our c value.